Most people believe that Canaan was just an empty land, waiting peacefully to be claimed by exhausted pilgrims. The truth is something else entirely. What really happened and who controlled that region required overcoming a formidable logistical and military impossibility that defied reason. This is the brutal history of the forgotten peoples who inhabited the Promised Land before the arrival of Israel. Have you ever wondered how a group of former slaves, fresh out of the desert, managed to annihilate civilizations that mastered metallurgy and monumental architecture? And what exactly made Canaanite culture so repulsive to the biblical authors that it justified a decree of total extermination? The answers to these questions aren't found in abstract myths, but are etched into ancient military reports and the dust of calcined bones that archaeology continues to unearth. The land of Canaan was not a unified country, but a fragmented and blood-soaked chessboard filled with armored city-states and warrior kings who answered to no one but their own ruthless gods. If you had stood there at the end of the Bronze Age, around 1400 BC, you wouldn't have seen serene pastures, but a theater of perpetual war, where the air reeked of molten copper, slave sweat, and the smoke of human sacrifice. The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, verse 1, lists the mortal enemies that awaited the Israelites on the other side of the Jordan River. The sacred text points to 7 nations more numerous and more powerful than Israel: the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. These names, often read in haste in modern congregations, represented the pinnacle of geopolitical terror in the ancient Near East. They were not nomadic tribes lost in the desert. They formed an insurmountable barrier of military might, tactical knowledge, and deep spiritual corruption. Terror reigned. Each of these peoples dominated a specific geographical and technological niche, creating a web of defense that should have crushed any invasion attempt. The Hittites, for example, were not mere background players. They were the proud remnants of the powerful Hittite Empire that stretched from the Anatolian Peninsula in modern-day Turkey to the northern borders of Canaan. Historians have discovered that the Hittites guarded a revolutionary state secret, the early mastery of iron smelting. While most armies fought with bronze swords that could bend and lose their edge after a few heavy blows, the scale armor of the Hittites was as hard as the hide of a Nile crocodile, and their weapons began to incorporate a metal that would change the course of human history. Their chariot tactics involved light, spoked-wheel vehicles manned by 3 men, a driver, an archer, and a shield-bearer. This innovation turned their mobile units into infantry grinding machines. When the Israelites marched, they faced soldiers whose swords fell with the force of an anvil dropping from a roof, shattering wooden shields and tearing through flesh with terrifying ease. Instant death. To the south, dominating the coastal trade routes and fertile valleys, were the Canaanites themselves, a people of merchants and sailors who would later be known to the classical world as the Phoenicians. They held a monopoly on Tyrian purple, a dye extracted from thousands of sea snails, so valuable that a gram of the product cost the equivalent of 30 grams of pure silver. The wealth generated by this trade allowed the Canaanites to fund the construction of staggering fortresses. Modern archaeological excavations have revealed that the walls of Canaanite cities were feats of formidable engineering, often built upon sloped embankments called glacis, which prevented the use of battering rams and siege towers. The walls of Jericho, for instance, were as thick as the length of 2 rhinoceroses lined up, rising nearly 50 feet from the outer moat. Attempting to invade these cities with traditional tactics would be like throwing pebbles at the side of a mountain. The system held. No Bedouin tactic could work against 3-ton stones perfectly fitted together. Moving up to the central hills, the scene shifted to the domain of the Amorites. They were the masters of the mountains. The book of Genesis, chapter 15, verse 16, mentions cryptically that the divine judgment on Canaan would have to wait until the iniquity of the Amorites reached its full measure. That phrase hides a brutal sociological reality. The term Amorite often functioned as an umbrella to describe the native populations of the highlands. Fierce warriors who built fortified kingdoms in rugged terrain where Egyptian and Hittite chariots could not maneuver. Life in the Amorite mountains demanded a devastating human cost that official history rarely accounts for. To understand the human toll imposed by the elites of Canaan on their own working and military population, one must look at the pathology of bones unearthed from that era. The physical toll was inhuman. Amorite and Jebusite slaves and peasants spent up to 14 hours a day breaking limestone and carrying blocks under a scorching sun in an environment where rainfall was unpredictable, averaging only 500 millimeters per year. Chronic dehydration was a daily sentence. Stone dust infiltrated their lungs, and skeletons from the late Bronze Age reveal staggering rates of spinal tuberculosis and severe dental enamel hypoplasia, a scar left on the teeth by extreme fevers and prolonged childhood malnutrition. The flour they consumed was ground in basalt stone mills, and invisible grains of sand mixed into the bread sanded their teeth down to the nerves over the years. The average life expectancy for the lower class plummeted sharply. If you didn't die of dysentery before the age of 5, and the natural infant mortality rate often exceeded 40%, you would be considered an elder at 35, suffering from severe degenerative arthritis in the lumbar vertebrae. An army as numerous as a cloud of locusts required resources the land simply could not sustain, leading to periods of severe famine that lasted up to 7 consecutive years. Absolute silence. In the midst of these formidable nations dwelt the mysterious Jebusites, entrenched in a seemingly invulnerable fortress atop a steep hill that would one day be known as Jerusalem. The citadel of Jebus protected a vital water source, the Gihon Spring, ensuring the city could withstand sieges of months or even years without succumbing to thirst. The natural defense of the Kidron Valley and the Hinnom Valley turned Jebus into an island of stone in the sky. Isolation fueled military arrogance. When the Israelites arrived, the Jebusites piously believed their walls were so impregnable that even blind and lame soldiers could defend the city against any horde of invaders. However, the most disturbing barrier faced by Israel was not military but biological and psychological, embodied in the tangible legends of the Anakim, or Nephilim. The Book of Numbers, chapter 13, verse 33, documents the terrified report of the 12 spies sent by Moses to map the territory. They claim to have seen giants, descendants of Anak, before whom the Israelites felt like mere grasshoppers. For centuries, the secular world dismissed these passages as poetic exaggeration. Yet extra-biblical records and archaeological anomalies confirm that the region of the ancient Levant housed lineages of warriors of exceptional stature, possibly due to isolated genetic traits that favored partial acromegalic gigantism, combined with elite diets focused on dairy and animal protein that commoners would never taste. Encountering a phalanx of elite Amorite royal guards on the battlefield, immense warriors whose spears had bronze tips weighing nearly 15 pounds, was to paralyze the enemy with sheer shock. These men were as tall as an entire floor of a modern commercial building, advancing with round shields that covered an average man from head to toe. The psychological impact on the ranks of Hebrew slaves, whose average height documented at the time hovered around 5'3" due to generations of poor diet and forced labor in Egypt, was enough to cause a national mutiny of catastrophic proportions. The alliance broke. They didn't retreat. They refused to fight for nearly 40 years, wandering the desert until that traumatized generation was replaced by a new batch of warriors hardened by nomadic life. But the martial and demographic narrative of Canaan doesn't fully explain the directive of moral annihilation recorded in the scriptures. The corruption of the Canaanite peoples was not a vague accusation, but a highly codified, dark religious system documented in detail in the Ugaritic texts. Discovered accidentally by a Syrian farmer in 1928, these thousands of clay tablets deciphered the theology of Canaan and revealed a pantheon governed by the supreme god El, but dominated in practice by his son Baal, the god of storm and war. Baal was depicted riding the clouds, controlling the rain in an arid climate where precipitation dictated who lived and who starved to death. Beside him were goddesses of unusual brutality, such as Asherah, the mother goddess associated with fertility and ritual prostitution on the high places, and Anat, the virgin warrior goddess whom Ugaritic myths describe wading knee-deep in rivers of human blood, wearing severed heads as necklaces and amputated hands as decorative belts. Depravity was the state norm, the most abject practice, and the one that sealed the fate of the Canaanite peoples in the divine decrees delivered to Moses was the industrialization of human sacrifice, specifically ritual child sacrifice. The book of Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 21, expressly forbids anyone from giving their seed to be sacrificed in the fire to Moloch. This was no metaphor. The archaeology of the ancient Near East and Phoenician colonies in the Mediterranean, such as Carthage, has revealed literal pits filled with hundreds of clay funeral urns containing the charred remains of infants and small children, some only months old. In moments of extreme national crisis, prolonged drought, or military siege, Canaanite kings and nobles didn't just sacrifice their herds, they sacrificed their future. Blood on the altars. The ritual took place in an open-air enclosure called a tophet. The procedure required an immense bronze statue of the god, often with a calf's head and outstretched arms, to be heated from within by a furnace fed with firewood for over 12 uninterrupted hours. The bronze reached temperatures of approximately 600 degrees Celsius, glowing with a lethal incandescent red in the dark of night. Families then handed their living babies to the priests, who placed them upon the searing arms of the idol. The flesh burned instantly, producing a thick odor that drifted through the stone streets, while the sound of dozens of heavy drums was beaten in a frantic rhythm to drown out the agonizing screams of the children and prevent the parents from going insane with grief or interfering in the sacrificial act. The blood on the altars ran thick as molten pitch, staining the limestone forever. Screams in the dark. The institutional promiscuity and perversions detailed in Leviticus were not secret transgressions, but public fertility rites designed to manipulate the gods through sympathetic magic, ensuring the land produced food. Cultic prostitution, bestiality, and the venereal diseases that inevitably accompanied such practices created an environment of sanitary and moral calamity that the biblical text literally describes as the land vomiting out its inhabitants due to so many abominations. The law of chaos governed every aspect of urban culture. When the tribes of Israel finally crossed the banks of the Jordan River, the conflict that followed represented a clash of unprecedented scale. The human cost of the invasion was extreme for both sides. Imagine forced marches through the deep Jordan Valley, the lowest and driest point on Earth, situated at an incredible 1,400 feet below sea level. The heat of the valley hit like the door of a blazing furnace opening suddenly, often exceeding 45 degrees Celsius at the peak of summer. The warriors' sweat evaporated almost immediately from their skin, while the weight of the equipment, axes, spears, and hardened leather shields, drained the stamina of the strongest men in less than 45 minutes of hand-to-hand combat. Canaanite bronze swords tore through flesh and light armor, and wounds became infected with terrifying speed due to the absence of antisepsis and antibiotics. A deep cut to the thigh meant lethal fever, gas gangrene, and death within 72 hours of agony. Entire cities burned. Plague spread through the alleys like fire through a field of dry wheat. But the Canaanites also carried the weight of their own disunity. The Egyptian diplomatic records, specifically the Amarna letters discovered in 1887, bring to light 382 clay tablets sent by the vassal kings of Canaan to the Egyptian pharaoh Akhenaten. The letters are a pathetic testament to Canaanite desperation a few decades before the collapse of the Late Bronze Age. Rulers like Rib-Hadar, king of the ancient city of Byblos, sent frantic dispatches begging for archer troops to defend him from internal rebellions and groups of raiders, often called Habiru or Apiru. He wrote that his cities were being devoured, that famine was ravaging his people, that dogs wandered eating the dead in the dirt streets. The geopolitical tension was as fragile as a clay pot cracked under the midday sun. The Egyptian empire was distracted by its own internal religious reforms and refused to send the necessary battalions. The stage was perfectly set for a complete annihilation. Canaan was sick, fragmented by intertribal jealousies and border wars between petty kings who ruled territories smaller than contemporary farms. This fragmentation became painfully evident at the Battle of the Waters of Merom, recorded in the Book of Joshua, chapter 11. King Jabin of the gigantic city of Hazor finally managed to form a massive northern coalition, gathering a multitude of soldiers, horses, and iron chariots to crush the Israelites once and for all. The city of Hazor was the supreme nightmare for strategists. The metropolis was as vast as 25 modern soccer fields, housing an estimated population of nearly 40,000 souls, surrounded by massive adobe and stone walls, controlling the trade routes that linked Egypt to Mesopotamia. However, Joshua executed a shocking surprise attack against the Canaanite camps. He didn't wait for the chariot phalanx to be set in charge formation on open plains, where they would do the usual damage. Instead, the Israelite tactic consisted of night or twilight attacks, focusing on the destruction of Canaanite mobility. They hamstrung the valuable enemy war horses and systematically set fire to the fearsome chariots of heavy wood and iron, neutralizing the technological superiority of the Hazor coalition before the sun had fully risen. All was lost. The sound of worship drums was deafening, but now the predominant sound was the crash of military engineering collapsing in flames. Despite all the crushing victories narrated in the sacred texts, the destruction was never fully completed. The Book of Judges, chapter 2, verse 3, throws a bucket of cold water on Joshua's triumph, documenting that several tribes failed to completely drive the Canaanites from their iron strongholds in the valleys and fortified coastal cities. The historical consequence of this military failure was cultural hybridization. The Canaanites who survived the sword ended up becoming the architects of Israel's spiritual ruin in the following centuries, secretly teaching their dark agricultural rituals and spreading the worship of the god Baal, which competed daily with the exclusive loyalty owed to the God of Abraham. The Israelites absorbed the toxic culture they were called to eradicate, trading military victories for agricultural conveniences, and the daughters of Canaan soon sealed marriages that introduced small household altars into every corner of the new nation. The divine promise held, but the human price paid for disobedience was tallied in blood spilled over centuries of instability, idolatry, and eventual exile to Babylon. Ashes in the wind. The complexity of the invasion and colonization of Canaan does not lie solely in absolute numbers of the dead or rubble of toppled walls. The magnitude of the event is found in the survival of an oppressed people against a monumental force, rooted in the most abyssal barbarism of the ancient world. The seven peoples were judged by the unquestionable tribunal of time and history. The river dried up, What was destroyed were the great and formidable walls of cities like Hazor and Jericho, and the cruel, smoking altars dedicated to the god Moloch, reduced irrevocably to ashes, charcoal, and rubble that disappeared under the constant dust of millennia. What survived was the indelible warning etched into the pages of Scripture about the absolute corruption of the human heart, the potential depravity of societies without ethical boundaries, and the relentless, bitter, and inevitable cost of idolatry and human pride. A brutal warning that echoes across 100 generations. The earth finally swallowed its former masters with a muffled roar, but history has immortalized their errors as a testament of divine justice.